All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to start our local government panel. Again, this is one of our featured ones that we always get a little comment on. We want to understand how local governments are actively working with and the challenges and successes they have with permitting with oil and gas. And so we've got a fantastic group with a lot of experience that will be led by Mr. John Swartout moderating this group. With that, I will turn you all loose.
Thank you. It's my great pleasure to be here another year, and we have a really unique panel of people that in the aftermath of Senate Bill 181 passing that gave local government the ability to regulate the surface. These folks have stepped up to public service within their communities, and I think the most interesting thing is how different every one of their communities is. And that presents challenges and other things as they do their job to work to regulate oil and gas industry from a local government context and try to coordinate with the state. So let's set the context. With the passage of Senate Bill 181, the regulatory landscape for operators in oil and gas changed significantly in our state. Each one of you oversees oil and gas regulation within your communities, and each one of your communities is different. I'd just like you to take a couple minutes and give us the context of your community and that unique context and your specific role within that. A couple minutes for each one of you, starting with Robert.
Well, thank you for having me here today. I appreciate it. My name is Robert Aronoff. I'm the Oil and Gas Liaison for the town of Frederick and the LGD. And ultimately, having my perspective as a professional geologist, somebody that worked in the industry as a mud logger and then doing environmental remediation, I feel like really helps me out. Reviewing the permits that are coming in, and as far as Senate Bill 181 goes, I feel like that was a pivotal moment for us to be able to regulate the siting of these locations, nuisance, noise, dust, those sorts of items. But I'd be remiss if I didn't speak about Frederick's past. I know we've been kind of trying to get into that space for a long time now. There's a few court cases, Town of Frederick versus North American Resource Company and KP Kaufman versus Town of Frederick. If you want to look up some of those, they were happening in the late 90s, 2000s, 2010s, things like that. So, when 2019 came around and 181 passed, it was really beneficial for us to be able to regulate this kind of thing. In addition, Frederick views this from a unique context. So we're a small municipality, 15 square miles. We've had 600 wells drilled because we're part of the Spindlefield, very productive part of the DJ Basin. And so we don't really have any sticks left. We've got some permits that we're entertaining right now. It's looking pretty good, but we're looking more at winding down things as to winding things up. And that's really where we're coming from. We also have the highest concentration of KP Kaufman wells as compared to any other municipality in the state. So we're disproportionately impacted by some of these stripper wells and operators that may not have the means to upkeep those stripper wells.
Okay. Next is David Frank from the town of Erie.
Hi, everybody. Again, thanks so much for having me. I look forward to this event every single year. So I'm the Director of Environmental Services for the town of Erie. That has two divisions, the Sustainability Division as well as the Energy and Environment Division. Within that division, obviously we oversee oil and gas regulations within the town. But also, we keep an eye on our privately owned landfill. We have a major municipal landfill there in town, as well as doing environmental review for all the development projects in town. I think Erie's situation, we're just across the highway from Highway 52 from Frederick. And if you know where Erie is, we straddle County Line Road. So half of Erie's in Weld County, and the other half's in Boulder County. I think you could pick any county in Texas, any county in California, and I don't think they would approach oil and gas as differently as Boulder and Weld County. And so we're just stuck right there in the middle of that, right? And so we've got a lot of passionate folks with a lot of opinions, coming from each side of Weld County. And so we really look at it, try to take a balanced approach. you can't make everybody happy all the time. So, I think if you're upsetting everybody all the time, that's probably about the right balance. And the other element of Erie, like so much of the Front Range, we're just growing at what is really a breakneck pace. You look back, I live in Old Town. The street that I live on was paved in 1999, right? The year 2000, Erie had maybe 3,000 people. Like I said, dirt streets. We're now over 40,000 residents, in that 26-year span. And so in the process of that, obviously you're building these very large neighborhoods in what was rural Weld County, and so you're going to have inevitable conflict between the residents, the development community, and oil and gas producers. And so I think that kind of frames up the atmosphere that we're working in there in Erie.
Thank you, David. Next is Brett Cavanagh from Weld County.
Well, first off, I wanted to thank Kirby, Garfield County, everyone for attending, the colleagues on my panel. This is a great opportunity for us to present in front of you guys today. And I just want to say I have the privilege to really serve as the director of Weld County's Oil and Gas Energy Department. With my amazing team, we oversee local permitting, regulation, enforcement for oil and gas operations in unincorporated Weld County. Much like my colleague David here said, there's a lot of challenges, but we're working through them. After Senate Bill 181, Weld County formalized that local role through OJED, through our Oil and Gas Energy Department, and in our 1041 WOGLA process, which serves as the county's land use review for oil and gas locations before construction, before certain related permits are issued. One thing to note is we do have an MOU with the state, so it's great working with the ECMC in the state as well. We also have a lot of IGAs, or intergovernmental agreements, with municipalities and cities throughout Weld County as well. And we help with permitting, compliance, inspections. But what makes Weld County unique is scale. We are the leading oil and gas producing county in Colorado, so these issues are part of our day-to-day responsibility. We work at the intersection of responsible energy development, public notice, and land use compatibility, in the coordination with the municipalities and obviously the ECMC. Our role is practical. We make sure that development moves through a clear local process, that surface impacts are reviewed, and that affected parties are informed, and the operations understand expectations upfront.
Thanks, Brett. Next is Ailey from the town of Mead.
I also want to say a thank you to Kirby and everyone for having me here today. This has been a great opportunity for me to learn, and it's been great to be out here. So I represent the town of Mead. I'm a planner too with the town. So I'm not an oil and gas guy by trade, but I do represent the town as the LGD. If you don't know where Mead is, we're a community of about 7,500 people just northeast of Longmont, or 45 minutes or so north of Denver. But my experience with oil and gas is extremely limited. I won't be shy about that fact. The town of Mead hasn't had an oil and gas permit pulled in probably about 8 years before last year. So when we had a couple come across our desks, the alarm bells start to go off. You don't really know what you're doing. So we really relied heavily on information from others and trying to navigate that, since we hadn't seen it in so long. But the issues that we ran into is, you look into our land use code and how you're going to permit oil and gas, and our land use code takes a very hands-off approach when it comes to oil and gas. So we don't have very extensive regulations at the local level. So that's something that was a little bit tricky for us, but we're also in the process of updating our land use code right now. So it gives us the opportunity to take a closer look into environmental regulations, see what our neighboring communities are doing with their land use codes and how they're addressing that. So it gives us a good opportunity as well to address that. And But
Thanks, Alex. Moving on to challenges and solutions. One of the primary challenges, and I'd like each of you to do this because your communities are so much different from each other. Primary challenges you're currently facing as a local regulator, both within your community and in coordination with the state, and what solutions and approaches are you finding workable or even effective in trying to figure this out going forward? So we'll again start with Robert.
Thank you. Yes, so I've really found this, it's kind of split between the two. So we've got the boots on the ground. We're in the community doing the grassroots thing where we're trying to just kind of be upfront and transparent with our community as far as what's going on. To speak a little bit more on that, we stood up our oil and gas inspection program over the last year. It's just one of the facets of our oil and gas department. And ultimately, just having that information, we're just kind of documenting the situation out there. We work really well with a lot of the partners that we have out there. The operators oftentimes are part of those inspections. But that boots on the ground aspect is really important when you roll it into the rest of the permitting and regulatory side of things, because once again, we have a unique situation where we are in Frederick. We've been, a long-time oil and gas producer. And so ultimately, what that means is that we've got plenty of wells drilled in the 60s and 70s that are still active today in the town. And the other side of the coin here is just kind of communicating and working with the state. And so we have some really great conversations that have been going on recently with the state, and I feel like those need to continue into the future. Once again, I feel like Senate Bill 19-181 really gave us the opportunity to do a lot more collaboration with the state. And so really appreciative of that. Sometimes it is difficult as a local government to find your voice and be heard within that environment, just because it's not always the easiest. There's a lot of work that goes into it. And I feel like that two-way communication is just going to continue to grow, and we're looking forward to that.
David.
Yeah, I think so. Our main challenges primarily stem from trying to facilitate the coexistence, right, of the existing oil and gas infrastructure that's in and near our town, new wells that are being permitted and drilled out there, and also the existing neighborhoods and the new neighborhoods. We had a circumstance where we had a neighborhood that had been in the permitting process for 5 or 6 years, which is not an unusual timeline from initial application to eventual final plat, selling lots and building those houses. And toward the end of that, we were past preliminary plat. We were granting final plats and certificates of occupancy for these homes. And an operator approached us and said, we're working with Weld County to permit an oil and gas facility adjacent to this community. And so it was a lot of work to coordinate with that developer, the adjacent landowner, the operator, Weld County, to make sure that everybody's projects could go forward without interrupting each other's work, right? And so that was one thing. Civitas at the time, now SM Energy, worked with that developer and committed to a defined occupation time, so that we knew when we were going to have rigs up, when we were going to have fracking and flowback happening, and we could phase that adjacent development such that we didn't have folks moving into their brand new houses right at move-in rig up, right? We can resolve that conflict by scheduling things appropriately, making sure we can get in, get those wells drilled, put them in production, and then move forward with those phases of that neighborhood that are most adjacent. And working with the neighborhood there to say, hey, you've got this open space dedication. Can we rearrange some of these lots to put that open space basically sort of as a buffer between some of these residential lots and where this oil and gas facility is going to be? And then working again with the operator on how we can do landscaping, right, to try to mitigate to the degree possible some of the visual impacts for those lots that are going to be, whose backyards are going to be facing that direction. And as the local government, we're right in the middle of all those conversations. And those are all things, those are all conflicts that that can be worked out, right? All of those can be mitigated, but only with close coordination with all parties involved, the relevant local government, the proximal, adjacent landowners, and operators. And so, as far as solutions to these things, it's having conversations early, right? Early in projects, at the initiation, so that there is enough runway to get these mitigations in place, and just to coordinate so that other impacts, traffic impacts and things are a huge priority for municipalities, to make sure that we don't have, large construction projects going on, major road closures, that's going to push traffic onto the haul route. Like those are just things that need to be worked out and thought about. So that involves our engineering division, our traffic division, working with our department, as well as operators, just to make sure we can identify and address all of those potential conflicts. Because again, there's multiple land uses trying to coexist in a small space.
Thanks, David. Brett?
That was really good.
Thanks.
No, one thing I want to be clear about is what I'm about to talk about. It really stems from the fact that we're not oblivious, and I think one thing we haven't really talked about today is that we are in a budget deficit as a state, and the one thing that we need to focus on is really energy, and how do we offset this budget deficit, and a lot of that's through permitting. So what I see as one of our biggest challenges is really the regulatory framework has become more layered, more complex, and it continues to evolve. A lot of people say, our finish line continues to move. And in the regulatory world, there is no finish line, not in Colorado. That finish line, I don't even know if we can see it anymore. And so that really means that local governments, operators, and state regulators are all trying to keep pace all at the same time. We're bound by rulemakings, legislation, and so as regulators, we're all trying to go through that. From a local government perspective, the challenge is not having standards. The challenge is overlap, it's duplication, it's changing expectations across different processes that can make timing harder to predict. And when you can't predict timing, your projects get delayed. You might move to a different state, you might move to Wyoming, and you move those resources and those capitals around. When similar issues are being reviewed through different frameworks, there's uncertainty and added time for everyone involved. And really what this comes down to, and we've talked about internally on my team and with operators, is how do we have substantially equivalent aspects to our permitting process, to our forms, to our exhibits. From our perspective, timing depends heavily on an application's quality, the site complexity, how early issues are identified and addressed, what has worked best for us with early coordinations. We really have strong pre-application meetings, a requirement from the state, and then we facilitate it through our MOU as well. Those discussions are really important. When we complete submittals, we clear expectations, and we are consistent in our communication with operators. We provide clarity. Municipalities and also state regulators. The early issues are identified, the better chance everyone has to address them before they become delayed later in the process.
Thanks, Brett. Alex?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest challenges, especially pertaining to oil and gas, that we experience as a smaller community on the Front Range is, we don't have an oil and gas specialist that works for the town. We don't have anyone who spends their day only working on oil and gas. Oil and gas ends up being a very small percentage of what I do on the day-to-day. And a lot of people in a smaller local government wear many hats. So, we rely on surrounding municipalities. Weld County, Brett and his team have been extremely helpful with the oil and gas that exists and is being permitted in the town of Mead with inspections and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it really comes down to not, you don't know what you don't know, and when you don't have a staff member dedicated to that, we can try as hard as we can to become experts in a very short amount of time, but at the end of the day, not having staff that's dedicated to issues like that is a big challenge for us, and one that surely will be addressed as we grow. You know, we feel the development pressures as well, even though we haven't moved as rapidly in terms of development as some surrounding communities like Erie and Frederick. But yeah, that'll come with time as development continues. But yeah, that was a big challenge for us last year when we were going through the permits that we got in.
Thanks, Alex. I just wanted to indulge for a second and say that I was the director of Colorado counties when Senate Bill 181 went through at the beginning of the governor's term, and it was, I think we took an amend position, and we were able to get some amendments on the bill and others not, and I really respect and Jeff Robbins a lot and Julie Murphy a lot because of the work they're trying to do and the work that they did. One of the promises of Senate Bill 181 was to get some of the conflict out of oil and gas regulation by bringing people from local communities that have to go to the grocery store with people they regulate. And it's a lot different to go to a local government hearing than it is to go to a state hearing where you get 2 minutes on the agenda to talk to CDPHE or another board and commission of the state. And the opportunity was, could we improve oil and gas regulation and do it in a timely way because of this local government component working and trying to work in coordination with the state and get community people on board with things, and because they were all over the place for many years when it was more of a state-centric system. So I want to dive into looking ahead from your perspective. What would help create greater regulatory certainty for the oil and gas industry while also reducing permitting delays and other delays, and all the time ensuring strong protections for your communities, which is all your jobs, essentially. So what are your thoughts on that? I'll start again with Robert.
Thanks again for the question. So ultimately, I want to just touch on your local government and bring them in. I can tell you for a fact that nobody's going to care more about Frederick than I am as far as oil and gas is concerned, and that goes a lot. That's not just as far as environmental impacts are concerned. That's economics as well. And so, you know, economics and development. I mean, people bring me properties all the time, and in the town of Frederick, the fact of the matter is there's oil and gas on every single one that's being brought in front of me. So we're trying to navigate that to the best of our ability. And it's not always fast and it's not always quick, but, you know, David spoke on this earlier, but, you know, getting your key stakeholders involved as soon as possible in the process is really important. That communication part, you know, that really goes a long way to getting your permit through the system as fast as possible. You know, a lot of the times we're looking at like developers agreements and we're looking at various other road maintenance agreements, things like that, you know, those take time. And typically, you know, I'm not a one-man band. I mean, as far as oil and gas in the town of Frederick is concerned, I am, but we have attorneys on our staff, we have engineers on our staff. And so there's a lot of coordination and communication that has to happen at the local government level to be able to process one of these permits. And just like Alex was saying earlier as well, you know, we don't have an entire department with staff that are kind of ready and willing to just jump into this permitting process. I mean, as far as the permits that we're seeing right now, we also had a delay. We did not have permits since about 2018. And so processing a permit when we also had a complete overhaul of our Article 9 of our land use code, which governs oil and gas drilling and production, it's really difficult to navigate, especially on the first permit there. And the fact of the matter is, in Frederick, since we don't really have sticks left, there's not really a whole lot of opportunity to be to receive additional permits unless hopefully the technology changes. People can thread the needle a little bit closer between some of those sticks and things like that. But really, it's that communication. And I feel like this event goes a long way toward that. I mean, there's not too many other events where you're going to find people from the industry, people from local and state and federal level governments having a few drinks together and eating delicious steak out in the field. So, yeah, but that communication, that aspect, and stakeholder engagement, and just honestly being genuine. Every day is a good day to turn a new page. If things aren't working well, things aren't going well, at the local government level, it's really easy to pivot. Just let us know what is or isn't working for you, and it's a little bit easier for us than behemoth like ECMC or other federal agencies that might coordination and communication internally might be a little bit more challenging even than what we're dealing with at the local level.
Thanks, Robert. David?
Yeah, I think, looking at how to improve the process, I'm going to talk about two things. One is, so in the immediate aftermath of SB 19181, Erie and probably a lot of other communities, we rushed and we drafted a section of our municipal code, in our case it's Chapter 12, outlining these new authority given from a surface use, land use standpoint to the town. But that was done before ECMC did all the heavy lifting and hard work of actually doing the rulemaking. So there was a lot of assumptions and kind of guesswork of what that portion of our municipal code should look like. So now that the heavy work at the state level is done, we're going to go back through those regulations at the local level and see what's duplicative of what's going on at the state, what's of actual value to the town. There's a lot of things in requirements in there now that, looking back, with hindsight, reading them, saying, boy, this is a burden for operators. It doesn't benefit the town in any meaningful way. We need to get those portions of the code out of there. There's no sense in having regulation just for regulation's sake if it's not actually going to improve things for our residents and for our community. And similarly, when working with SM Energy on this recent oil and gas development plan, one of the alternative locations was a location in Erie, and they said, hey, you have some requirements here that are really unclear. So probably primary of which is required zoning for an oil and gas location. The town requires a heavy industrial zoning. But if you go through the other portions of the municipal code, that zoning is not well defined, nor is the process to zone a parcel for heavy industrial use well defined. So, that tells me that I need to go and work with our planning and development department to say, hey, if we're going to have these requirements and these regulations, we need to know why we're doing that, and we need to have clear guidance on how you navigate that system and clear expectations. And so that's work we need to do on our part. And then the other piece I want to touch on is communication with the public. It is one of the most difficult jobs of a local government. It's you can lead the horse to water situation. We try to keep residents informed. You're always still going to have a group of residents that are totally blindsided, despite however many notices, however many notifications you put out there. But it is a critical component for local government to make sure that the community has a chance to be heard, to state their concerns, and to have those conversations. Because, yeah, let's face it, most of the public knows very little about modern oil and gas production. And so there's an educational piece, there's conversations that need to happen there that necessarily must be facilitated through the local government, whether that's town halls, public hearings. It's a crucial component, because nothing makes the public more angry than feeling like they haven't been heard.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Brett?
Well, first off, a lot of looking ahead. I couldn't do it without my incredible team that's here today. Some weren't able to make it, but that team also includes all of our staff at Weld County, our county attorneys, and our commissioners as well. So I want to first say thank you to them. I also really commend Erie for looking back at their code. That's something that we took on last year, and we find that in the regulatory world, everything's changing, and we found that we needed to make some changes ourselves. We have an operator meeting coming up at the end of the month, and so I welcome anyone to come and let us know if our code changes are working. But we really do understand that things do change. And so the health, safety, and well-being of our residents and environment is really important to us. But really, what I really want to talk about is, looking from a state and local level, what would be most helpful and is greater clarity, consistency, and alignment across the regulatory systems. Strong protections for public health, safety, welfare, and environment are essential, but the process also needs to be efficient, predictable, and workable. We should be focused on accelerating permitting through clearer expectations, better coordination, less duplication, while still maintaining meaningful protections. And I think that's the part that a lot of people think that you accelerate permits and you're going to forget about everything else. I think you can do both. I think at Weld County we've shown that. Granted, we only do the surface, but I think that's the most important. It impacts the residents that are right there. We do listen to our residents. Part of our code change was our notification process. Our complaints, people can file complaints much easier. We track them. Our inspectors are amazing with getting out there and going through them. And through that, it created transparency through our department, through our county. And much like David said, education is really important. The more that we can educate people with facts, not opinions, facts, they're going to make correct policies, correct rule changes. And hopefully the legislators start to hear us. We need everyone in the room to understand that we're all important as this moves forward. So, delays caused by overlap and uncertainty is not the same thing as protection. If applications understand what is expected, if agencies are better aligned where requirements overlap, and if complete applications are met with a more predictable review path, that helps everyone. Responsible oil and gas development remains important to Weld County, to local communities, and to Colorado more broadly. The goal should be a system that allows good projects to move forward in a timely way while still holding the line on health, safety, welfare, and environment protection. To me, greater certainty comes from clear standards, consistent applications, and a process that is protective without being unnecessarily slow or duplicative. Thank you.
Thanks, Brett. Alex?
Yeah, I think there are two sides to this. I think there are things that we need to do to improve, especially with the unique situation that we're in. With our land use code, we're responsible for taking a really deep look into that and taking that really seriously when we get that updated. And like I said before, we're going to look really hard at what surrounding municipalities are doing and what their codes look like on that end. Like the rest of the panel was saying, education is super important. We really appreciate opportunities for open houses, things like that, where residents can come out and are noticed and can learn all about the process and what's going to be going up in the community. But yeah, so I don't know. As far as permitting goes, what we really appreciate is quick turnaround times, addressing any comments and concerns at the first time of asking, and I would like to think that the way our permitting process is right now is relatively quick. I don't know, you'll have to ask Oxy about how quick it was, but I'd like to think that we did an okay job at moving quickly through the process and getting their local approvals done before they went to the state. But yeah, I think there are two sides of it. We need to do some things better, and we need to start having those conversations, and then keeping the community informed is also huge.
Thanks, Alex. These guys went really fast, so you get a bonus question, and then we'll have time for questions from the audience. But one of the things I think you all have in common is you're in an area that's developing quickly. It's one of the, between Douglas County and Weld County, two of the areas of the state that are facing enormous pressure for additional housing. Those become conflicts, with oil and gas, and it also has become an issue of you have aging infrastructure in most of the work that you do that was, from years and years ago, and redeveloping that land that's no longer used for oil and gas is a challenge for probably each of you. What are your thoughts on that? Starting with Robert.
appreciate that. I feel like that question's somewhat pointed to me, but yeah. I mean, so just as a real world example, we recently heard a permit, and I know a lot of you in this room know what I'm talking about. You were either involved or watching, and you know, when you have development that's surrounding and encroaching upon oil and gas, and I did say that right, development encroaching upon oil and gas is often the case. It's not always that way. Sometimes we have oil and gas development encroaching on development. However, this recent application, I mean, the permit application, it was really good, is the difficult part. And the concerns of having, you know, $1 million homes around a pad with, say, 48 wells, 50 wells on it, it's really concerning for a local government, and it's not necessarily purely the permitting process. It's also the fact that we're going to have people living in these $1 million, $2 million homes right by a very large industrial facility. And those are the kinds of people that have the resources to really let their local officials know and really kind of jam things up at the local level. And so that can be a really difficult thing to navigate. So, you know, David spoke earlier about phasing. You know, phasing is a really good option for when you need to do some development, but the time might not be ripe for the entire development. Maybe you can start in one section that isn't necessarily as impacted by potentially oil and gas operations, and then come back a little bit later when you have things either cleaned up, buttoned up, remediated, whatever needs to get done out there. Just make sure that gets done before building on top of it. I know, I mean, yep, I'm here. I'm Frederick, but you know, people often call us the Tri-Town area. We have Dacono and we have Firestone right around us, and you know, when oil and gas, aging infrastructure, and heavy development interact, it can be explosive sometimes, just to be honest with you. And you know, those are the lives of our community. That's the well-being of our community, our environmental resources. And so it's a tricky space to navigate when you're on the I-25 corridor, and you know, your population in the 90s was less than 1,000, and now it's over 18,000, probably be over 20,000 by the next census comes around. So we're really bustling out there, and it's not always easy to find these properties that are ripe for development, but at the same time, I feel like that what I spoke on earlier, that communication is really key. There's typically not anything we can't work around. It's not like we're skirting the rules here, but it's responsible development. And while it might not always be fast, you know, we really do care about Frederick about as much as anybody else is going to, especially our elected officials.
Thanks, Robert. Anyone else want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, that's honestly, this occupies the vast majority of my time. Is you have developments come in, and there's a lot to it. We had a preliminary plat that was passed by our council 2 days ago, Tuesday evening. 300 acres being developed for single-family detached residential. That 300-acre parcel has 25 plugged-in abandoned wells on it, and that's the norm. Those are the parcels that we are trying to develop, and so, yeah, it's, you know, you've got to be forward-thinking as a community. Obviously, you know, operators do a fantastic job plugging these wells, but that community is going to be there indefinitely, and we've got to be, you know, contemplative of the fact that at some point those wells may need to be re-entered and replugged. And so organizing the neighborhood so that you can, in the future, get a workover rig into that neighborhood to safely re-enter that well, you know, could be 50 years from now, could be 500 years from now. You don't know, but you need to do the work at the beginning in anticipation of that eventual need. And, you know, wells that were plugged back in the 20th century, do you know exactly where that plugged and abandoned well is, right? What are the coordinates on file with ECMC? How were those collected? How accurate are they? What investigations do you need to do before moving forward with that community? And then, you know, just weird stuff that you don't think about until you start doing this work. You know, hey, the sanitary sewer for this neighborhood needs to go over here. And as you all know, it's got to flow downhill. And so then you have, existing, midstream infrastructure. And so, now you've got an existing line, but this new sanitary sewer line has to be at a very specific elevation in order to reach the wastewater treatment plant. I'll tell you what, town engineers hate lift stations. That's just equipment that has to be continually maintained and will break down. And that's part of your municipal infrastructure that you really don't want to have issues with. People get very upset when that particular modern amenity is no longer available. And so that requires a lot of work with operators, midstream operators, primary oil and gas operators, to make sure that we can fit all of that utility infrastructure, together, like a crazy jigsaw puzzle to again be able to have co-usage of this land and to get everybody's projects moved forward.
Thanks, David.
I'd love to have the opportunity to speak on that one. At Weld County, we really pride ourselves on protecting the infrastructure, and I think too often, sometimes municipalities and cities put back on the oil and gas that hey, you didn't see all this development coming. And I think Frederick and Erie have done a great job. I worked with Erie when I was in the private sector. But one thing at the county last year, we did change some of our rules from setbacks from plugged wells to help facilitate future plugging of wells if need be, getting back in there. But one thing that we really do in my department, and my team does an amazing job, is we look at all the developments across Weld County within those municipalities. And one thing we push back on those developers is the word that developers hate is, where's your ALTA survey? Where are you showing all these pipelines? Where are you showing all these facilities? Where are you showing all these agreements from a title perspective? And I look at ALTAs as the visual representation of title. And too often we get submitted developments from housing, and they have nothing on them. And then they get brought before our planning department, and we're not reviewing that because we expect them to do there. I think as municipalities, as counties, regulators, we really need to push back more on these developers. They're getting lazy, quite frankly. They should be submitting to us ALTA surveys showing exactly what is going on. From our perspective, from everyone in this room, oil and gas is really important to our state. The pipeline infrastructure, while aging, we need to protect it. The only way to protect it is making sure that we understand where it is. I'm not saying some counties are looking at making rules to maybe require them to tell them where their pipelines are. It gets a little tricky from a perspective of we don't want people to get that information all the time, but they will work with us. All that's public information. If they do their ALTA surveys, they will locate them. They will find those pipelines. Flow lines, pipelines, consolidation lines. As David knows, the sewer line that he's talking about, that same developer has reached out to me multiple times to ask me, what can you do from the county's perspective? And I'm like, the pipeline was there first. And the problem is you have a developer that's building this sewer line that's going to turn it over to the city. And the developer wants to do one thing, and the city's like, you can't do it. And so their lack of actually understanding of locating this pipeline has led them to this area. And it was one of those situations where an ALTA survey would have done really good. And they were off, I don't remember, they thought it was much deeper, if I remember right.
It's like 16 inches something.
Yeah, so
which is just enough to derail the whole project for 2 months,
So it's interesting. But what I'm trying to say is from Weld County, we're going to protect these assets. And I think that's the number one thing. And we're going to protect the residents to educate them to understand not everything is dangerous. You need to have an ignition source. But at the same time, don't build your home right next to a facility and expect things to be okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, I echo a lot of things that these three have said so far about development. Yeah, ALTA surveys are another thing that we take very, very seriously, and we require every new development to bring to the table when they're going through the process with us. I think it'd be really hard done to find a future development or active project that doesn't or didn't have oil and gas on it at some point in the town of Mead. It's something we deal with a lot, looking at setbacks to existing wells, buffer zones as well, how that impacts lot layout, the street network, trails, things that we think about and look at all the time. The idea that eventually some of that land could be developed, what that looks like, but yeah, other than that, what these three said, I echo all of that. It's all this new development, especially in Weld County, oil and gas plays a huge impact on that. So,
Thanks. We have some time for questions from the audience, and for perspective, I just want, when I started working for Governor Bill Owens back in 1999, when people bought a house, it wasn't required on the title that they were told that someone owned their mineral rights. So we've come a long way since then, and these people do a great job within their communities and trying to work with the state. So questions from the audience?
Nothing? Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, hi. Russell Bean from System 1 Environmental. And I live in Erie. I moved up there 4 years ago from Broomfield to get away from it all. And now I think I'm going to have to move to Mead pretty soon. Yeah, but just basically, I'm just wondering, so when I tell my fellow residents, I get two answers. Like, I do environmental consulting for the oil and gas industry. If you're in Weld County, they're like, thank you. If you're in Boulder County, they're like, what are you doing? So it's a big difference. So I think when I sit there and I explain exactly what I do and how much the industry really tries to do the right thing, people are like, I have no idea. So I guess I'm just wondering, with an Erie or Frederick or Mead, have you guys thought about having like an energy day or some kind of town day to where you have people from this industry, could be solar, wind, like energy development day, and then people come in and then ask any question they want to people who work in the industry. I think that might go a long way, just to inform the public. I don't know, that's it. Thanks.
Anyone want to take it?
I mean, I'll touch on that really quick. I think that's a really great idea, really beneficial. But we need buy-off. We need buy-off from our communities. Not everybody cares about oil and gas the same way as maybe somebody that lives in Boulder might. And I know I can speak for Frederick specifically. I mean, we've got complaint portals. I can tell you I've received 0 complaints this year. Actually, in my almost year and a half of being there, I've probably received 2 legitimate complaints. I go to almost every single one of the town events, and we've got a slew of great events, chainsaws and chuck wagons. I mean, there's there's a bunch of them. They're really great. If you haven't been, you got to come out sometime. That's just my shameless pitch here real quick. But, I go to all the events, and typically people are not that interested. I mean, we have an event called Miners Day, and I go out there with the maps of all the coal mines and stuff like that to try to educate the public. But typically the oil and gas questions are pretty few and far between, which is surprising for somebody that lives in that area. So I'd love more community engagement, and I'd love to be able to do something like that. But if there's not enough community engagement just in Frederick, maybe there could be a regional something. Maybe there could be a Weld County something that we can all team up together, try to do.
I was just going to say really quick, and I know the question was more for them, but sometimes the loudest voice isn't the majority. And I think we shouldn't make policy off people being loud. And if we start thinking about the facts and start listening to everyone and not just the loud ones, I think we're going to be better off.
Yeah, I get frequent phone calls from folks looking at buying a home in Erie, or folks that are already under contract and then discover that this is an active oil and gas field, especially folks that are coming from out of state. Places.
California.
Yeah, well,
Texas.
There's and generally they have a lot of questions, and I think that's a significant and worthwhile role of local government, is to have those conversations. I'm not gonna say like, Yeah, of course. There's never been a pipeline spill. You have nothing to worry about. At the same time, it's not, wow, the sky is falling. No one in their right mind would live in a community like Erie. My goal is to just provide real and factual information so that folks can make an informed decision for themselves and their family, because everybody has different risk tolerances. For some folks, yeah, living next to an oil and gas facility, don't bat an eye. For other folks, hey, unfortunately, maybe this isn't the community that you should live in, and it's very individualized. But I do like the idea of doing some mass communicating. Perhaps we can kind of partner up there on the Northern Front Range.
Yeah, and you are more than welcome to move to Mead. I think the way development is progressing right now, you might be looking at property in Wyoming sooner rather than later. But yeah, we are really big into getting the wheels turning on educating the community on what we do at Town Hall. Our police department is really into community education opportunities. We're looking into ways that we can do that as a community development department, because it's really important, I think, for members of the community to understand what our role is and what that role looks like when it comes to development. We've done a lot of work in educating our Planning Commission and Board of Trustees on what we do from the day-to-day. But I agree with you guys. It would be fantastic to be able to put something together, whether countywide or between a few municipalities, to further educate the community. It'd be great.
Thanks for that.
I was going to say one last thing,
Okay,
sorry.
go ahead.
I think a lot of people move to Weld County because it's amazing. It's not only beautiful, the trails, the bikes, all that, but it's the school systems, our fire departments, our roads, and those all get funded from oil and gas. And when you really think about it, that's what we need to educate people about. You love all these things, and then you don't want them. It's like, well, go move back to Broomfield. No, I'm just joking. No, but at the end of the day, don't take advantage of something in a county if you're not going to support the industry that makes it so amazing.
Thanks. That's the time we had for the panel. I want to thank Kirby for picking this panel. It was a variety of communities and interests, and these are people with really tough jobs that have found a way to do it and work with their communities, and they're amazing public servants. I got the opportunity to interview each of them before this panel, and I've rarely seen people with the kind of determination, willingness to listen. These are great public servants. Please give them a hand.
We do have a couple minutes for Q&A. So some audience Q&A, you bet. No, we're good.
Okay.
Audience Q&A. Anybody wants to ask these guys some questions? This is an important one, so please stand up. You need to stand up and stretch anyway. Come on over one of these microphones, or if I can hand you one, I will.
Can I ask a question? Or first off, I was going to make a comment. I hired an environmental specialist years ago when I was working out of Parachute, and he came from California, and he was reclaiming a lot of industry. It was not just oil and gas. It was refineries as well as oil and gas sites, and they would build subdivisions, in California, and those are existing today. Obviously, Beverly Hills and Hollywood, right in the middle of the oil field, right? Mm-hmm. Pumping unit right next to $1 million homes. You see it in the movies and everything else when they're filming in Hollywood. So maybe apply some of what California's done. I don't know. But I was going to ask, what are the setback rules? The setback rules for the oil and gas industry is 2,000 feet away from a residence, right? What's the setback rules for the developers now? To be how far from an oil and gas well?
That's a loaded question.
Any volunteers?
I can explain what our approach in Erie was. From the time where we have a Form 2A submittal, any sort of permit application from an oil and gas operator who wants to build a new facility or do new drilling at an existing facility, we do a 2,000-foot setback from that facility for development until those wells are in production, because it's during those pre-production activities that are the most impactful to adjacent residents, whether that's from an air quality concern or much more practical things, noise, light, all the, the very large amount of haul trips that are going to come to and from that location. Once that facility's in production, everything quiets way, way down. And so that setback then drops down to, in Erie's case, a 500-foot setback. And then once a facility has been decommissioned and the wells are plugged and abandoned, Erie's approach to that is the default is a 150-foot setback, which is a pretty large setback. But that's necessary, especially from wells that were plugged, in the 20th century, where we may not have good location information. There may not be an existing operator any longer in the state of Colorado for that well, and there may be unaddressed environmental issues associated with that old wellhead, and so the burden is on the developer to dig up the information, to do the studies, the environmental studies, and to demonstrate to the town that well is where we think it is, that it is plugged correctly, that it still maintains integrity, and that there aren't ongoing environmental issues at that site. Then we can reduce that setback down to to some smaller piece there, while still being able to allow future rig and pipe rack access there. So that's Erie's approach. It's kind of a staged approach, trying to be mindful of what are the purposes of the setbacks are and what's protective, while not infringing on a landowner's right to develop and do with their land what they see fit.
Anyone else? I guess that's it.
Is that it, y'all? All right. With that, a round of applause for our
Thank you.
panel. This is wonderful.
Thank you.
Much.